Good morning and welcome to the first concurrent session of the day, the new way of relating to students in times of COVID. Here today is Hope Kate from Cape Fear Community College. Hope Kate is an applied sport psychologist who specializes in helping people develop mental skills to overcome stress, anxiety, and performance issues. Skills have helped her to become an effective adjunct instructor in psychology. Hope has a contributing researcher for 2 books and gives professional webinars, teaching skills, and techniques. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Everybody, like she said, my name is Hope Kate. I wanted to go ahead and start sharing my screen so we could kind of get into what's going on. So what I would like to talk about and what I have been researching is the different ways that we have to adapt our teaching skills now, pre, current, and post-COVID. It's different in different parts of the US, so we have to address all three really. As she said, I am an applied sports psychologist. I have been studying teaching methods, specifically online teaching methods, now for 3 years. I'm an adjunct professor at 2 different schools, and I also do online counseling for people who are dealing with stress and anxiety and performance issues. So it's kind of my bread and butter of what we're talking about today. What research has been showing us is that the old ways of teaching college students doesn't really hold up now to how modern students learn. And you can apply this to traditional and non-traditional students. Most of the classes nowadays, we have all 3 types. We have face-to-face classes, we have hybrid classes where they meet half the time face-to-face and half the time online, and then we have completely online classes. These were things that we didn't have as much before, and even with the online learning, it wasn't as prominent as it is now. And that can be due to finances, distance, but it's also, we're finding to be because of people's fear or uncertainty with the modern day that we live in. So we have to look at different ways to address that. What we're also finding is that when we have lecture-only teaching, it's really not getting through like it used to. We have to start doing more activities, more interactions to engage students because of their own lifestyles and pressures and stresses. It's interfering with their ability to focus and concentrate. And the last thing that we're seeing, that when we have non-relatable assignments, and it's mostly just book work, busy work, worksheets that don't relate to the subject, or activities that are just pre-made from the publishers, we're getting a lot less interaction, and we need that engagement for students to continue with their education very well. So what we've done is we've looked at all these different ways through learning science and found there's new ways to teach. And that includes dealing with COVID protocols. You know, some places still have full mask protocols inside the building, some don't. We have to learn about safe learning distances and personal safety issues. So classrooms are having to be reorganized and redivided so that we can have that space for everybody to learn. We're looking at a huge increase in online learning. That's definitely something that's really taking off and is a good thing because more and more people are able to really get into learning now, no matter where they're at. So we have to be prepared for that. But we're also seeing smaller class sizes. Whereas before, most classes, especially at one of the colleges I teach at, maxes out at 25 because we keep a really good student-teacher ratio. We're getting classes with 8, 10, and 12 people. So we're having to adapt to those smaller class sizes and offering more classes themselves. And the last thing we really have to be concerned about is our students' mental conditions. Not only are we teaching them something, but because of all the different stresses they have outside of class, we have to be aware of that and be compassionate about it so that we can make sure they're still learning well, but they're developing in a way that's really helpful for them. So how do we do this? Well, we're learning all kinds of new research through brain MRIs. And I'm going to share some of that with you. It's really interesting, and it kind of gives us a different perspective of where our students are, especially our traditional students from 18 to their early 20s. We're going to talk about what's called the Pandemic Balancing Act. It's a whole episode of figuring out how to balance dealing with the pandemics and still moving forward with learning and teaching. I'm going to share with you some emotional coping strategies that I use when I counsel people myself, and also that I've used in classrooms to see how well they work. And then I'm going to talk to you about the 5 principles of learning science. These are really helpful, especially when you're working in the classroom, but even online. And these will help us understand the mental anguish that students are going through, the maturity levels that our young learners are at or not at. And then hopefully it will help you see ways to encourage students to study and especially complete assignments on time, which I'm sure many of you are realizing that they are getting later and later, lots of excuses. And some of this will be shown through the coping techniques. And then just better ways of communication. Unfortunately, we have to adapt to not just our learning curriculums and our students, but us as instructors and teachers and facilitators. We have to adapt to these new ways, and so that we can get the most out of our students and the most out of our own jobs. So let's start with the brain research. This has been really interesting that I've done some research on and read other people's research and compiled what I got to really show you where the differences have happened. So what we have figured out, and this is kind of new to some people, but to some others, they already know it. We're seeing that the early teens, early 20s, all that in between, from about 17 to 23, their brains are still very immature. The cerebral cortex is thinner, and what we thought where they would be at emotionally, cognitively, and developmentally, they're actually about 3 years younger than that. This is significant because it shows us that our young learners, especially from 18 and up, they don't quite have the full cognitive development and skills to deal with social interactions. They're still figuring that stuff out. They're still figuring out how they want to interact together and how they want to present themselves. We're seeing that they're not able to regulate their emotions well. That emotional regulation skill is still forming at this time. And we knew that going into all this, but the research has shown us that, we were still off by a few years. We're seeing a lot more impulsivity behavior, and ability to assess risk is a much lower in this age group. Now, we expect that in adolescence, but we're seeing it into the early 20s now, where we thought that the young adulthood development would really be kicking in. It's not quite kicking in as soon as we thought. And their ability to make long-term plans. I'm sure many of you, anybody who's 40 and older or 40 and younger understands that we always have that. Where do you see yourself in 2 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? But what we're seeing is our new learners are not able to really think about that and figure it out yet. So this research has really shown us that prefrontal cortex development that is so important for these things is not there yet until they're about 25. And I hope that really kind of shocks us all to realize, yes, we have to expect a lot from our students, but at the same time, we have to realize where they are in their cognitive development. So this has really helped us not so much take a step back, but take a step sideways and pause for a minute to figure out, well, what does this really mean? Well, what it's showing us is right here. We're getting much more poor academic performance. We're getting many more pupils dropping out of school, and that's not good. We want to encourage this and help them succeed as best as possible. So when we realize these things are happening, we have to figure out, okay, why is it happening, and then how can we fix it? 91% of the students that were interviewed feel stress and anxiety. That's much higher from about 80% before COVID. 81% feel much more sadness. That's due not only to dealing with COVID or dealing with people who have lost others, but it's also that isolation, that non-ability to get together as often, and living vicariously only through internet and social media. That said they feel sad, or 80% said they feel lonely or isolated. This number is not going down. We want it to start going down as more people are able to get out and interact, but it's still really high. So we're trying to figure out if it's mostly because people are a little nervous to get together, or they can't get together because of scheduling problems, or if it's just because they got into the habit of being alone, that it's hard for them to change. So as this research comes out, I'm sure everybody will be seeing it as it comes out more. And unfortunately, our rates of financial setbacks have gone up from 40% to 48%. These numbers are pretty high right now, and they're not really changing in a positive way. They're pretty much staying the same. So about a third of all the students that were surveyed from 17 to 25 years old are reporting more and more mental impairments since May of 2020. So that's only been 2 years, and we're trying to figure out the best way to fix this, but it's still something that's ongoing. So as more learning science does research, we can have these numbers hopefully fixed. And going through these different techniques I have for you, hopefully they can be fixed in your area too. What we're seeing also, not only was in the mental impairments, but there's a socioeconomic component to this. A lot of people have less than adequate software or hardware, so their laptops are out of date. They don't have internet access at home or where they can work at. Their physical space they work in is not very good. It may be a dining room table with the rest of the family running around. It may be a little rickety desk in a corner that's not very well lit or have a window. And so all these things, the socioeconomic pressure is adding to that daily stress. So not only are they getting stressed from their physical aspects of COVID and whatnot, not only are they getting stressed from their requirements for school, but they're getting stressed from the ability not to have that ideal classroom setting, either online or in person. So all of this is adding up to something that's really hard for us to figure out. So how do we balance it all out? With what's called the Pandemic Balancing Act of Teaching. This has been really helpful for me personally, because I teach all three formats. I teach in-person classes, online, and hybrid classes. And figuring out how to get it all together has been quite a challenge, but it's really been helpful for me with my students, and I've got some really good feedback on it. The main thing with the Pandemic Balancing Act is we don't only have to look at grades and attendance, but we have to start looking at our students as whole people. I know that sounds like we're adding more and more to what we already do as instructors or facilitators or professors, but when we just change that mindset a little bit, it's really helpful for us to be able to deal with the stresses of students not turning in their assignments. Now when we're talking about students or talking with students, we're not only talking about this assignment's later, this assignment's due, but we want them to let them know, you can talk to me. Let me know what's going on. Let your advisor know what's going on. They can help you. I can help you. So this is showing our students that, yes, you are a person to me, not just a name or a number. And just that little bit of a tweak, just letting them communicate better with you and encouraging them to work with the school counselors and the school advisors, is helping students to realize, oh, these people actually care about me and can help me figure out how I'm going to do all of this. That also means we have to design our courses just a little bit different to promote that success inside and outside the classroom. We have to change our verbiage a little bit on our syllabus. We have to communicate more through email, but it does really help to have that connection with the students as people, so that they can concentrate better and stay on track. The thing we see when we're trying to help students is they're very, very uncertain. So if it's something they're wanting to talk to you about, there's a few ways that you can look at this, and I have it listed here. Help figure out if it's something real to be concerned with, or if it's a what if. So if they come to you and they're really upset, or they're trying to figure out how to get everything done, they're going on and on about their stress level and they're, concerned about it. Let's just break it down simply to say, okay, what is it actually that's the problem, or what is it that's actually bothering you? And if it's something real, like I don't have internet at home, or I have nowhere to study, that's something you can address easily. But if it's there, I don't know if, I don't know if, I don't know if, that's coming from a place of overthinking. This is where their thoughts get looped, and you start overemphasizing the importance of things. And sometimes it's not even things that are actually important, but our students get stuck here and they get very hyperactive in their emotions and their imagination, and they end up overstressing, overthinking, and their logic just goes out the window. So if you can help them stop that right when they start talking to you, figure out if this is something they just are micro focusing on and overthinking, that's the first step to helping students. Help them manage that uncertainty and figure out what actually is the problem versus what isn't the problem. To help students understand, because they don't know how to deal with it yet, is stress. Stress is completely unavoidable, but it actually is good. It helps us focus, it helps us concentrate, helps us learn to deal with issues. So stress isn't always a bad thing, but when they get overwhelmed with it, then it is a bad thing. So I have some great ways here you can help your students do this. You can do it in class as an assignment, or just as part of a lecture, or if you even want to devise something that you can put on their online aspect, like a little handout for them. I do like a discussion post and say, hey, how do you deal with stress? And then let them reply to each other. It helps them realize, oh, wait, I'm not alone in this. Other people are feeling the same way, and I can work through that, or I can talk to my peers and stuff. Great ways that you can encourage them. The first one is journaling. Now, when I say journaling, a lot of people think of a fancy notebook with a fancy pen, and you're sitting, in a nice chair with a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be like that. I mean, really emphasize with them, it's just some kind of notebook in your hand, even if it's small, that fits in your pocket, and a pen. I really encourage my students to journal because it helps them what I call download. All the are overthinking and overemphasizing. As soon as they put pen to paper and write those things down, they can start to see patterns of behavior. Now, what those patterns can show them is, I get really stressed when I'm dealing with A, or when I talk to this person, or when I'm going to do this assignment. When they can start seeing those patterns of behavior, and those start coping and learning to deal with it. You don't have to do anything else except just offer the suggestion to them. Journaling is a really good way for people to handle stress and anxiety. I encourage it with all my patients. I encourage it with all my students. And so far, I haven't had anybody say they hate journaling. They use it in any aspect that really helps them. The second way we can help them with stress is get outside. This helps for all of it. Encourage our students to just be in nature, go for a walk around campus, go sit outside and work on an assignment. It's going to boost those serotonin levels. And when we boost those serotonin levels, we get that happy feeling. So we want to encourage our students to move around, get outside, just take a couple deep breaths and just enjoy being a person for a little bit. They get so hyper focused on what they have to do, they forget that there's a beautiful world out there. The third one is physical activity. Yes, physical activity and get outside can go together, but anytime we get them moving, I encourage students not to just study for hours at a time. I tell them, set a timer on your phone for 30 minutes. When that timer goes off, get up, move around. Even if it's just to go to the bathroom or go get a drink of water, they're moving, they're getting their circulation going. And that really helps them boost their performance. That along with nutrition. Our students don't eat very healthy, mostly because they're busy. They're going to school, they have part-time jobs, they have full-time jobs, they have a family, they have a sick relative. There's a lot going on in their lives. They tend to just grab whatever they can get, which normally is fast food. If we can encourage them more to choose better options, instead of the burger, get the chicken sandwich. Instead of, a big heavy meal, get a salad. Any ways that we can encourage them to increase their nutrition is also going to boost their performance level. And when those performance levels are boosted, they have less stress, they have more confidence. The last way to help with stress with our students is to encourage very good sleep. It sounds super simple, but I have just pound this into my students' heads over and over. Sleep is a necessary part of memory retention. When we sleep, we get that consolidation in our brains. We get chemicals that wash away the day's little tidbits of information. It also helps promote neural growth and our memory retention. So those things are super important. Even in one of my psychology classes, in my intro to psychology, I have them keep a sleep log for a week. And then they talk about it in a discussion post, and we analyze those. And it's really important to see their reactions. They're like, man, I only get like 6 hours a night when I really need to get like 7 to 8 hours. No wonder I'm so tired. So awareness to them, it's going to help with that stress level. So these are really good ways to help with stress, since we know all students deal with that. The can help them is with time management. Now remember, what we realize is our students are not quite at the level where they're able to manage their time efficiently and effectively. So they need little helpers every now and then. What I like to do is stuff like this. Use a task list at the beginning of the week. Show everything that's required for that week, and it helps them organize their study habits better. I encourage students to use planners, to use calendars, and to use the calendar on their phone, because that's always with them. Again, they're using their technology and they're using something to get it out of their head. They're writing things down so they can get those things more concrete. When we encourage them to use those things, it helps them reduce the stress that they're feeling, because all that stuff's not rolling around in their head. They actually have it on paper. Another way I encourage students with time management is through my communication with them. When you have things due, I send them an email the day before. Hey, guys, remember, we have a discussion post due tomorrow by 11 p.m. on blah, blah, blah. It's really helpful. I've got good feedback from it. They're like, it's really helpful because, either I got too busy or I forgot something and you reminded me, oh, I need to get this done. Just email communication is really helpful for students. Just a small step, and it takes us 5 minutes to send a class email, but the impact is really. I've also helped students with time management by reducing late assignments. And what that does is, if assignment is due on Friday and I have a student come to me in a panic, well, I can't get this done, blah, blah, blah. I only give them a week to get it to me. I don't give them, an unlimited amount of time. I set a date, I set a time, and they get it to me by that time. Because our students are still maturing, when we give them rules, boundaries, and limitations, they actually prosper in it. So think about how you train a dog or a small child. You give them boundaries. Okay, you can do this within this boundary. You give them the rules, the limitations, and they know exactly how far they can go, and then they just blossom within that area. I found this to happen with students too. I hate to compare them to dogs or little kids, but sometimes we have to see it that way, that we're a facilitator to help them through. The time management is really helpful, especially email communications, day before assignments, reminders during the week, just kind of checking in with them, just letting them know I'm here, you're here, and we can work together. Another way we're trying to help students is with our emotional coping strategies. They don't know these by nature. We have to teach them ways to do this. So what I like to do and what research has shown is when you're working on lessons and you're giving them lectures, find some relatable videos and articles that can really help them in this aspect. If you're talking about things like, well, stress or pandemics, even history, things that happen, relatable articles or videos on YouTube or TED Talk that talks about what's going on in that aspect, and then show them in class or have them assigned as a homework assignment. And what that does is it shows them that they're not alone. We all think we're an island, especially when we're young, and the truth is we are very much not an island. So just be able to do that, be able just to help them along with it. Is pretty much all classes now have some kind of online component. You use Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas. And what we've seen is if you set up a classroom study group in a discussion forum and just tell them, hey, this is for you guys to communicate together, share notes, ask questions. I'm not involved. I'm just a facilitator to make sure everything's running good. It's been really successful. I wasn't sure that it would be. I didn't know if they would actually, use it, but they have, and they've been doing really well with it. So I'm really happy to share that with you. That's new information. But setting up that classroom study group for them to share communication has been really helpful. I talked about the real world examples of the teaching. That's been really helpful to help them cope with emotions, cope with figuring out how to deal with emotions, and the encouraging. Not only does it help with time management, but it helps them with their emotions. You're kind of like their little cheerleader, and it helps them remember to keep things organized and keep moving forward. I always have the resources for the school counseling offices in my classroom or in a folder for them. When you see a student who's starting to really struggle or has come to you many times, their work is slipping, I just hand them the handout saying, look, you should probably go get some counseling. Even if they're a little nervous going, I'll go with them for their initial visit just to set it up. And just helping them, giving that tiny little push has been really great to get them the help they need, because they tend to forget about it. They just get stuck in their emotions. Giving that little push, they do quite well with it. Helping students in this situation is these two aspects. Discuss the consequences of their actions and remind students that they are resilient and competent. Have a little bit more explanation of what happens if you don't do this assignment or if you don't take care of this. It helps them out a little bit because they just look at numbers. They're like, A, B, am I going to pass or not? It's like, well, if you don't take care of this now, then it's going to cause a problem here. Or if they keep coming in late to class, if you keep coming in late, you're not going to get the notes. So therefore, you're not going to do good on the test. Just, take them step by step a little bit more. And it's been really helpful for them because, again, remember, they're still maturing up in their cortex. Saying all that, we still need to remind them how awesome they are. They tend to micro-focus on every aspect of school, which is good. But getting that obsessive compulsive about it is not good. So remind them, hey, you guys are doing great. I'm so proud of you. Remind them when they do a great paper or a great report, that was really good. I know you have a lot on your plate right now, but you're really, you're putting in the effort, and I can see that and I appreciate that. And just that little bit of encouragement when we're seeing them as a whole person that little bit has been really helpful to make students realize, oh, wait, I am awesome. I can handle this. And somebody actually sees it. So just remember that aspect, just a little bit more encouragement, a little bit more direction. It'd do really, really well. Now, all these different ways we can help students with the balancing act. They're still dealing with pandemic. They're still dealing with family and situations, but can they actually rebound to a new normal way of life? And they are still having some issues with public health. They're still having financial issues and connectivity issues. We're seeing that they're dealing with grief at a much younger age. A lot of students have known people who are either critically ill or have died of COVID. So we're trying to be much more receptive about that. But the biggest thing we're seeing with the rebounding is our students have a new way of looking at the world. Their expectations of the world have changed. The students aren't really seeing things like, okay, I'm going to graduate or go to grad school, and then I'm going to get a steady job and be in that job for 10 to 20 years. A lot of them are starting to take their destinies into their own hands with alternate income streams. They're looking at developing products. They're looking at starting their own business. They're looking at getting into the social media world with influencing and product testing and blogs and videos and stuff. So we're seeing this rebound. They're almost taking it into their own hands. So it's been really interesting to like, okay, what do we do with this information? Well, it goes right back to seeing them as whole people, not just numbers. So when we're doing that, we're promoting those interactions between us and the students. So we're seen more as facilitators as well as academic instructors. We're helping them deal with things. We're helping them understand how to deal with things. And then we're also encouraging them just as people. What they're doing is it's helping them rebound, helping them get back to a quote unquote normal life. It's a new normal that we have. And the best way we can do that is through the 5 principles of learning science. And I'm going to show those with you. So learning science is a great way of researching how students learn and how we can increase their performance. And there's 5 main principles that it deals with, and they go directly into how we can work with students. Some of this sounds a little repetitive, but I just wanted to make sure it was instilled in what we were talking about, so you can understand how we're learning and how we're using learning science. So try not to have long lectures without participation. That normal back before COVID, really, but we're trying to break it up a little bit. Have a segment and then ask for interaction, ask for questions, or give an example. Use a lot of supplemental material. Their attention span is lower, so I use a lot of videos, print articles. We'll do small group work. Anything to kind of keep them engaged, but you want to have it active. You don't want them just having notes taken for an hour or 2 hours at a time. Second one is teach students how to be successful. We talked about this a little earlier with coping skills. Good students are made, they're not born. We have to teach them how to be good students. So I like to give students, multiple opportunities to interact. I do a lot of discussion posts with replies. Small group work is excellent. You can even include worksheets with that so that they're actually working on the activity, but they're also in a small group discussing it. And even giving small group presentations, it's really good. We have to teach them how to have that multiple ways of success. Keep class fluid. It's okay to deviate from a lesson plan. We all have our lesson plan set. We have our week set. Things flow how we have it set up. But sometimes you need to talk about a subject a little bit more, or you want to have another kind of discussion about it with your students, or another group work, or another activity in class or out of class. If we go over a week, that's okay. We can just divert that next week. Give tips on assignment management. This is where we do the help them plan it ahead. We're doing the email reminders. Hey, you guys, remember you have a quiz due in 2 days, or you have a discussion post due in 2 days, and a reply. Just those little assignment reminders to help them with management. Shorter and more often due dates. What this does is it helps them do the assignments faster instead of having a week or 2 weeks to do something. Bring it down to just 3 or 4 days, and more often assignments. So instead of having big, long assignments, do shorter assignments more often. And you'll see that they're engaging much better and they're more successful because their grades are higher. Number 3 of the principles is use technology to our benefit. All of us are learning new ways to teach online, in the classroom, using all the different computer stuff we have, and use that to your advantage. They communicate through technology already, so let's use it as our advantage. Social media information is really good, especially if you're talking about ways to reduce stress. Inform them that, when we have a lot of social media, it actually can make us very stressed out. Discussion posts, I've already talked about that, but it's really a good way to get them interacting together. Have them make their own assignments. If I'm talking about them to research it more, instead of saying, okay, now research this with this criteria, I tell them, pick 1 or 2 of these topics that I'm giving you and go research it, and then you're going to teach it to the class. I've got some really good feedback like that, and it's been really helpful for them to get engaged and stay engaged. Videos and photos is part of assignments. So not only are we asking them to turn in like a paper or an online assignment, but get them to do a video assignment. There's plenty of areas in most libraries where they have quiet rooms, and they can do an actual video presentation. That is really helpful when you have people who are shy or don't speak up in class a lot. Video presentations are a great way to do that. Photos is part of assignment that just helps them have that visual relatability to things. Let them help teach a subject. That kind of goes back to making their own assignments. Gotten some really good feedback with that. And Learning Science has shown us that that's really helpful because it gets them engaged in ways that we may not have thought about. Color and graphics in your lectures. As you can see with my lecture notes, I have a lot of color going on. I always have a visual, but the information is clear on the screen. And I change that up. I use animations a lot, and it really keeps them engaged because they don't know what's coming next. So number 4 is set clear expectations in class. Now, just know exactly what we want from them, then they're more comfortable in their role as a student. We all have syllabus, we all have rules and expectations, but just look through them. Make sure they're not too wordy, make sure they're not outdated, and they're relatable to what we do now. And it's really helpful to look at that. Have an email response policy in place for you and your students. So what this means is in your syllabus and your class expectations, we have email communication now. We can't avoid it. It's part of our technology. It's very, very helpful earlier. But have a policy in there. Something like if a student emails you, tell them you will hear back from me within 48 hours. But also have it the other side. If you send an email to a student, you expect a reply in 48 hours. This is really helpful to keep communication constant. So they don't just send you an email and then just forget about it. That policy has been really helpful. And having a class calendar. Remember, we're still keeping class a little fluid. When we have that calendar, just showing them by week, hey, this week we're going to talk about this topic. We may have a couple of discussions. This week we're going to have a topic. We may have group work. It helps them keep that time management. And they can write that down in their calendars and know, okay, next week we're going to talk about psychological issues, or this week we're going to talk about how important memory is. It's been really helpful for them to prepare for class and to know what's going on. And then number 5 is what I talked about before, rules, boundaries, and limitations. Have clear boundaries for you and your students. Hey, you need space too. And because we're seeing them as more of a whole person, there's going to be more communication, but set those clear boundaries for that response time. Do that 48-hour policy. Set your office hours and stick to them. Set the time that you're going to do some study help for students. Don't stay in your office 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day doing things. If you're working from 10 to 2, then at 2 o'clock, you get up and go do something else. We can't be stressful and help our students be stressed less if we're full of it. So we have to make sure we set our own boundaries. The next one is promote interaction between you so they don't fall behind. This goes back to that email communication. If they're falling behind and you say, hey, there's an assignment coming up, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I just can't, all those excuses we hear over and over and over again. Yes, we know they're stressed out. But if they wait to the last minute, that's not taking care of themselves. That's why those email communications are so helpful. Talking about communication, I've actually seen that if you have a communication grade, especially for online courses, it's been really helpful. So when you have that policy of 48-hour communication between either of us, if they're not listening or they're not participating in it, they start seeing that they have a grade that's going down. Think of it like a participation grade in classes. But for online classes, we don't really have that. So I call it a communication grade. And because students know that it's a grade in class, they've been much better about keeping their communications. Last one is the standards. Many times when our students are emailing us, it doesn't matter if it's an online class, face-to-face class, they just want to send the information and be done. But they didn't send us their full name, they didn't send us their class section, they didn't send us what the assignment was, they just want their question answered. That's unacceptable. They have to see this as a professional thing. So have it in your policy. Every time you send me an email, I need your name, I need the name of the assignment and your class section. Because all of us teach multiple sections. And just like we need space and boundaries, we can't spend all that time searching for things to figure out who this person is and what we're talking about. It's their responsibility. And by doing that, by setting that on them, that gives them that ownership of, oh, I need to make sure that I'm giving them what they need so that I can get the answer I want. These have been really, really effective ways to show us that we can help our students with their stress levels. We can help them learn time management and dealing with emotions and the coping techniques that you have to learn all this stuff. So I hope you have really enjoyed what I've talked about. As you can see, I'm very passionate about it. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. And also here's most of the references I use. Feel free to look them up yourself and really dig into it further.
Thank you so much, Hope, for the information you shared with us today. You mentioned if anyone has any questions that they want answered, you can use the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom room screen. We do have another minute or two that you can get those in there. I do want to mention that our next concurrent session will begin at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So you can view the chat for session meeting room links or access to the conference website for a complete list of the concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team, view a quick 5-minute demonstration, and be entered to win the hourly giveaway. Your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. Thank you again, Hope. It looks like we don't have any questions at this time. We appreciate you coming in and presenting today. This was a lot of really valuable information, and we hope to see you all at your next session.